Good morning, first graders. This morning I want to read this story to you, Papa and the Pioneer Quilt. But before we begin reading this story about a family that explored the West before there were states out there, we need to find out some information about things that are going to be in our book, Papa and the Pioneer Quilt. So before we begin, we want to find out, what was a wagon train? What was a wagon train? A wagon train was a group of covered wagons that went together on the long trip west. The wagons would travel in a single line so that from a distance they looked like a slow-moving train. If the trail was wide enough, they would sometimes spread out to get away from each other's dust. At night, the wagons would form a big circle with the front of one wagon facing the back of another. Children would often play inside the wagon circle after dinner and just before bedtime. So here's the wagon circle. And as they traveled during the day, they would travel in a line, and it kind of looked like a train. So we're going to be hearing about a wagon train in our other story, our other book. Now in our book here that we're about to read, this family wanted to go travel to Oregon. And so this explains to us, why did some people want to travel all the way to Oregon? Well, back in the 1840s, you heard about faraway places by reading newspapers and hearing stories told by visitors that came from distant places. So they did not have computers that told them about things. They did not have television that told them about things. So they learned about it from other people who had been traveling. They heard about it from newspapers. And so in this story that we're going to read, the father had heard about Oregon from other people. And so that's one of the ways that you could hear about it. And people would, stories were told about Oregon made it sound like it was a magical place. So people would start to describe Oregon and describe going west as something very magical and amazing. Like the land there was just amazing. So people wanted to go out there. They had lots of dreams about what it would be like for them to move their families there. So there were also, as we know where we live right now, we have lots of tall trees and lots of rivers and streams and mountains. And that's what people were thinking about, all the great beauty that was out in Oregon. So the very name Oregon made people think of a great adventure. And they wanted to go there and wanted to see what it was all about. So that's what today's story, the father in today's story, had heard about Oregon, and he wanted to check it all out. So let's find out more. Papa and the Pioneer Quilt by Jean Van Leeuwen. Move this over here a little bit so you guys see better. My papa has wandering feet. That's what Mama always says. Those feet have taken us a lot of places, from Pennsylvania, where I was born, to Ohio, where Harrison came along, then to Indiana, where Jacob joined the family, and Missouri. Our new little baby, Susanna, was born there. The family. And now Papa's feet have us wandering again, this time way out west to a place called Oregon. I don't want to go. I loved our little farm and my pet calf Dolly and Grandma living just down the road. But Papa said, I hear tell land out there is the finest a man could want. And Mama said, we have to go, Rebecca. This is Papa's dream. So we set out in the early spring by wagon train. Oh, there's the wagon train. So they went with other people. Trouble was, my feet looked like they'd been worn out before we even got there. I walked along beside the wagon 10, 12, sometimes 15 miles a day. My shoes were all scuffed up before we even got to Kansas. imagine walking 15 miles a day? Whew, that's a long ways. Sometimes Rebecca walked beside me. She was a new bride. She smiled all the time, even though all she had in the world was a copper kettle. One noon, when we stopped for dinner, she showed me what was inside. Little scraps of fabric, that's all. Just old bits of this and that. I'm sewing them into a quilt, she told me. So when Thomas and I get to Oregon, we will start our life with a kettle and a quilt. I liked that. Turning old bits of this and that into something new. Maybe, I thought, I can make a quilt too. So I asked Mama, that's a wonderful idea, she said. You collect the scraps and together we will sew the quilt. Mama gave me a string bag. The first thing I put in that was a handkerchief Grandma gave me when we left. Her tears were still on it. That handkerchief was the only thing in my quilt bag for a while, until the day we crossed the river. Oh, that river water was flowing fast. Papa tried to hold on to the oxen, but he was pushed under. Next thing we knew, the river carried him away. Papa! Cried Jacob. The three men pulled him out and laid him on shore. He lay so still, my heart was pounding. Jacob started to cry. There's Papa laying on the side. Then Papa opened his eyes, and he was all right. But not his shirt, ripped from top to bottom. Even Mama couldn't sew it up again. What do you think she's going to do with that shirt? Yep, so she put it, into my quilt bag it went. So she was going to use that for her quilt as well. Rachel told me stories about her scraps. This one is from my daddy's old coat, and this is the bonnet I wore to church, and this is a piece of my mama's apron, and the breeches of my brother Isaac wore when the dog bit him. Her eyes filled with tears. I may not see any of them ever again. We decided to trade a piece of my father's blue shirt for a bit of her mama's checked apron. I added it to my quilt bag. A few weeks later, we were in Nebraska. A new family joined our wagon train. They had 7 girls, and one of them was Maddie, and she was near my age. It was so nice to have a friend. Maddie and I watched the little ones together and looked for prairie dogs and talked about home. One day we found a whole field of bluebells. Bluebells are a type of flower. So you can see them here. A whole field of bluebells. Oh, let's pick some, said Maddie. We picked big bunches to decorate the wagon and more for our hair. I placed a crown of buttercups on Susanna's head. She didn't like it. Here they are. Have them even on their heads. Do you see them on the wagons? They decorated the wagons with the bluebells as well. Trying to page here. Maddie walked with me through all of Wyoming to where the trail split off for California. There we sadly waved goodbye. Wait! She came running back, pushing her sunbonnet into my hand. Keep it for your quilt, she said. My pesky brother Harrison could never sit still. He'd fall off the wagon 3 times. The last time was the worst. The wagon behind us ran right over his foot. Papa said it wasn't broken, and Mama hugged him close. Then she saw his breeches were all in tatters. You scamp, she scolded. How are you going to keep your clothes till we get to Oregon? So I got something else for my quilt bag. Good thing he was okay. Being run over by a wagon seems pretty serious. At last we reached the mountains. Everyone had to get out of their wagon and walk to lighten the load for the oxen. But the trail was so steep, and the poor oxen were so tired. Steep means that it was kind of like this. It wasn't flat. It was steep. It went up in an angle. But the trail was so steep, the poor oxen were so tired. Papa coaxed them. He pushed and pulled, but it was no use. We need to lighten their load still more, he said. We left a trunk of Mama's good china beside the trail. Mama cried, so they had to get rid of some of the things, even her trunk full of all her dishes. They had to leave that behind. The mom was sad, but if they wanted to get across the mountains, they had to get rid of some things. But we made it over the mountains. On the way down, we came upon a broken wagon, its contents all strewn about. Their oxen must have given out, Papa said sadly. We'll have to go the rest of the way on foot. That family could have been us, I thought. I looked at a pretty tablecloth. It's all right, said Mama. No one will be coming back for it. My quilt bag was starting to fill up. As I walked, I could feel every stick and stone beneath my feet. My shoes were worn so thin. Will we ever get to Oregon? I asked Papa. Soon, he said. We trudged up more mountains, across streams, down rocky hills. The nights grew cold. One morning, the wagon covers were dusted with snow. Now they were getting wintry weather. Wonder if that will make the trip harder or easier. 2 days later, just about noon, I saw something through the trees. Spread out below us in the sunshine was a wide, green, beautiful valley. Is that Oregon? I asked. Yes, said Papa. There it is. Mama hugged me. I saw Rachel smiling wider than ever. The men threw their hats in the air and we all shouted for joy. So after 6 months of traveling, we were in Oregon. One last thing went into my quilt bag. The dress I wore every day on our journey. It was worn and torn and mended, but some good scraps were left. Oh, they must have been so excited to finally have the journey over and to be where they wanted. We had a cabin now with 40 acres of land. The finest farmland he'd ever seen, Papa said. We worked hard all day, but at night, Mama and I sewed my own quilt. Mama said it would tell the story of our long journey. The pattern is called Wandering Foot, she said. I wasn't sure I liked that. I don't want Papa's feet to wander anymore. To wander anymore, I said. Maybe they won't, she said, smiling. We are almost to the ocean. We've about run out of country. So this is their new home in Oregon. Now my quilt is finished, and so far Papa's feet have stayed put. I'm hoping really hard we will too. There's their quilt, keeping everybody warm. Now they didn't have big, huge houses with lots of different bedrooms for each person. They usually had a one-room cabin, and you notice that she's sleeping in the bed with all her siblings, all her brothers and sisters, and so that is what normally would happen. They would all share a space, share a bedroom, and they are sharing a bed here even. So a little bit different from how we live. We're definitely blessed with our big houses. And this is a picture of a pattern of a quilt. That was Papa and the Pioneer